Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 181. Yes, that is it. There's got to be is that a prime number? I don't know if it is. 181. Doesn't seem like it would be, but you never know. Well, it's prime time for everybody to be on this, though, because we're going to be talking about phantom stock. Woo! I'm wearing my orange shirt, and it's also the day after our anything but typical CEO convergence that we had for the first 100 guests on the Anything But Typical podcast. And so Adam was one of those early podcast guests. So he was there. And Jack Santinello was one of the important sponsors. It was good seeing you there, Jack. So it was a bunch of fun at the Whitewater Center. And man, you can't order up better weather than what we're having right now. Woo, baby. So anyway, we're going to be talking about all things phantom stock, as well as what's the difference between that and what's the right way to go between that and regular stock and stock options and all kinds of other options that are available to business owners. It can be very confusing. So hopefully we're going to demystify that. Lots of stuff to talk about today, too. We actually have a Congress that may be just back at loggerheads between Democrats and Republicans, but at least the Republicans could get it together and, dang, voting clowns, you get a circus. That's all I'm going to say about that. So anyway, happy to have you guys jump in with questions. And Randall, he has been paying attention. He has sent us a whole bunch of questions. So we will get to those questions today, too, on hot GDP numbers, durable goods orders, etc. So thank you, Randall. This is really good stuff. And your observations are always insightful, too. So we'll address some of those questions. So in the meantime, Jack Santinello has found the new Speaker of the House's letter to Congress, I think, to his constituents. So I haven't seen that. So Jack's got that, and we're going to go again, and we're going to really try to dedicate the bulk of the time today to these various stock options. What's the best way to go? What are the pros and cons? Because there's not the perfect path for everybody. It's like there's pros and cons to each of these options. So we'll try to demystify that.
Sure.
Adam?
Well, thank you, Gary. Yeah, so I think the speaker race, to me, further just reemphasized the concern that we have that the tax rates that we're currently enjoying are set to expire in 2026. So if you just think like, okay, Republicans are typically the ones that say, hey, we want to cut people's tax rates. Like, in other words, it's very rare that you're going to get a Democratic Congress that says, hey, I know what we want to do. We want to pass a tax rate deduction for business owners. Like, that's just, that's like citing a freaking unicorn. I think they probably, and that's not to pick on. It's just that's not the thing. I mean, if you look at the Biden tax package, that didn't, really go anywhere. His fundamental thesis was, too much of the tax paying obligation is borne on the backs of individuals relative to corporations, and that's been a thing that's been changing over time. Meaning, it used to be that companies used to pay more of the U.S. government's revenue, and now they pay less relative to the individual. So in other words, I just would not look for them to try to decrease taxes any lower. And with this slim of a majority, and I mean, North Carolina just passed their redistricting rules, may or may not win in court, but that means that there's a chance that through redistricting that they increase their majority slightly, but it won't be much. That there's going to have to be an affirmative vote that gets through the House and the Senate and then signed by the president to continue with the tax, to continue, like not decrease them, like just to continue what we have, will require somebody to take some action. And again, you know, so everybody knows, I mean, the two big, oh crap, you know, things that are in that are going to expire are, first off, you know, small business owners are going to have about a 10% tax rate increase because the deduction is going to go away. And at the same time, you know, not that we're all planning on dying anytime soon, but the estate tax limitation goes down significantly. So basically, government's going to get, you know, half of your estate that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, you know, subject to some certain thresholds. So they actually have to do something. And I think what we just witnessed is that even within the majority, getting any freaking agreement on anything is even as something that should be as obvious to Republicans as lower government revenue. You know, like last time I checked, that was something that they're all supposed to be aligned on. Just seems really low, you know. In other words, like what I see happening is something like this, Gary. You know, Gary, I will be for extending these tax cuts because obviously that's exactly what the government needs, you know, is to extend these tax cuts forever. However, we must reduce government spending. And I know where I'm going to go look at. We need to stop funding Ukraine. You know, that's the way that we're going to go ahead and pay for these permanent. And then you're going to have like another group that's like, the hell we are. Like, we also stand up for being a beacon in the world. So no, I can't get behind that. You know, so it's just, you know, I'm not, again, I continue to not be optimistic about, you know, enjoying the rate environment that we currently enjoy. So, you know, the BGW tax planning advice is still the same. You know, hey, keep kicking the can, but be prepared. You know, kicking the can strategy, you know, may not pass muster for that much longer, because it would require some form of bipartisan unity. And in other words, like, in bipartisan for a tax rate extension would mean like a lot of Republicans and a few Democrats, not like 8 Republicans and 209 Democrats. Yeah. So like, it's gonna be tough. It's just gonna be tough, I think, you know, in this current environment, unless something changes. And then Jack's probably gonna show his screen that says that part of the plan is, well, we're going to reduce taxes for business. So I'm like, good luck with that. You know. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. Jack, what do you got?
Man, that was actually a good segue into what I'm going to show you guys. But yes, I have my own comments about certain things, but you did a good job about covering that. So just a quick kind of to make sure everyone knows kind of what we're talking about. And there's a lot more interesting facts about our new speaker, Mike Johnson, but he is, let's see, 51 years old in his 4th term and serves as vice chairman of the House Republican Conference, as well as the GOP deputy whip and assistant leadership role. He sits on Judiciary Committee and the Armed Services Committee, and also is a former chair of the Republican Study Committee. What I wasn't sure about, but I heard on the radio this morning, is he was one of the ones that wanted to look into the election. I don't think that he said that it was an improper election. I don't think he actually is on record of saying that, just that it would be proper to look into it. But he's being labeled as a Trump supporter, and potentially why there was a unanimous vote on the Republican side to put him into that position. So what I found this morning is we have an awesome, it's an adjunct company organization to our law firm, which is called Shoemaker Advisors. And what is interesting, I know I've mentioned this before, is when I've had them, when they've come in town and talked with us, a lot of times I'll take some of them to dinner, and I'll have a Republican slanting colleague and a Democratic slanting colleague. And, after a few glasses of wine, I ask them some very direct questions and ask them for their real opinion about things. And they're very collegial about it, but it's funny to get their elevator pitch and then bring down the walls and then say, okay, this is why that's stupid, this is why, so it's always very interesting. That group, actually, one of them has put out a copy of, and I was like, okay, oh, I got some secret stuff to look at, but no, I'm assuming that this is out in the public at this point, because he would want, and even if this particular letter is not, his positions on things are out there. So let me see if I can put that up on the screen to show you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
While Jack's doing that, I mean, because you do read about in the press, I kind of, my take on his vote against certification was sort of like a Jamie Raskin style. But I think Jamie Raskin did not vote to certify Trump. It was sort of like on the grounds of something, and in his particular case, it was on the Ted Cruz grounds, which is, hey, some states, may have violated their own rules by taking, liberties with voting rules, not like there was fraud. So it was more making the leak. They did go to the courts, and then the court said, you may be right, but there's no remedy, so you're wrong. Which was basically what the courts did with those challenges. Is, yeah, you could be right, but what do you want us to do? Throw out a bunch of votes? So
yeah, and I don't know. I mean, apparently there are 12 appropriation measures that are in front of them at this point. I'm sure there's more, but they're focusing on those. And then he talks about, okay, this is how we should discharge them in what order. So he talks about energy and water, legislative branch, interior, environment, various organizations and regulatory bodies, and then labor and HHS, agriculture. But then he gets very specific as to, well, I shouldn't say specific, a guideline as to what he anticipates doing or guiding Congress through, or the House through. And so obviously dealing with Hamas, legislative blueprint, appropriations bills, all negotiations, FAA reauthorization. I don't know what that is. And then continuing into appropriations, into various specific bills, moving forward, again, talking about money, the next year's budget, and then going into, so my point in showing you this is, it's a lot about where's the money going and how's it going to be spent. Yes, there is some discussion about regulatory issues and things like that, which, but you can see, the focus is, let's figure out where we're getting the money from, where we're going to put it to. So just wanted to share that is out there. And I think that this blueprint, this roadmap, is what got many people over the hesitation to put him into that position.
It's interesting.
You mean he's actually gonna have them do their job? What?
Yeah.
Well, it's on his wish list.
That's crazy talk, Jack. That's crazy talk.
Well,
no, but I mean,
wish list.
You also kind of highlight. You also kind of hit hey, the guy. I feel for the guy. The guy's on that's a struggle, because the 12 appropriations bills. I mean, that those are supposed to be breakdowns of things that McCarthy agreed to with Biden, and then the Senate went along with. But if you get 8 people no, I didn't, you did that deal, I didn't do that deal, you're not passing it. Unless somehow you made it something that a Democrat will vote for to try to pass it. So it's just tough, man. It's a tough job right now. tough job.
Yeah, it's, so dysfunctional. The fact that they got unified on one thing, which is mind blowing. But then there was no Democrat voting at all. So, you know, the bottom line is we still are at loggerheads, you know, and I don't know, it's crazy. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, if you kind of think about it from a corporate culture standpoint, if this was a company, that'd be the equivalent of, you know, even though that's what the leadership wants to do, I don't like it, therefore I will not do it. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's basically what we see happening, you know, right now, which is kind of not good. So, because like I would fire employees that did that. So,
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned corporate
yeah,
culture, because we've seen that with mergers of equals, which I lived through.
yeah,
You know, it was Bank of America when we bought Bank of America, and McCall says, make no mistake about it, we bought their asses. That's his words, not mine. That's exactly what he said. And yet the Wall Street Journal had merger of equals. Well, there's no such thing. And the cultures were night and
yeah.
day, you know, I mean, like night and day. So, and that's kind of what's happening. It's like, oh, well, you're Legacy Nations Bank. You guys are the devil. You are Legacy Bank of America. You guys are the devil. I'm like, really? You know, and yet when we got together, those of us that weren't the ones that were in the highest seats of power, we actually got along and we got stuff done. But, you know, the top brass people, there was a war, and some won and some didn't, you know, so it's just how it went. So,
and I'm going to go way off on a tangent, but relatedly, because we talk about culture, and this has just recently come up. So I hired two laterals recently, one corporate, one commercial real estate, because we need the extra capacity. It's just been very busy. And you know, so they go through I guess some people call it the star chamber, so the interview process. And then I pulled both of them aside off campus and basically said, all right, what do you want to know? What do you really want to know? And, you know, they're kind of tentative, a little bit timid. And I'm like, let me tell you what you should want to know about the firm. And I'm talking about the culture and the people. I'm not talking about the practice of law. I mean, in some respects, yes, I am talking about, okay, this is how we practice law, but I want them to know that, are they going to fit into the culture? Are they going to, you know, is it a right match on all those other things, and not, you know, and assuming that they're good practitioners of law, they wouldn't be talking to us. So that, I think, is just because that's in front of my mind. I just wanted to share that's very important, that you, when you're recruiting people, that you have that meeting of the minds. And so you don't have this, you know, this like culture like this from the get-go, because that is not sustainable. So one of two things is going to happen. Your culture will modify to accommodate that person, which is likely not the case, or that person will not be with you for very long, and you will have expended a ton of money recruiting, training, and everything else that goes out the window.
amen to that, man. Culture is the number one thing that blows a deal. It's not the money. It's usually cultural incompatibility. That's just been my experience. And if you want to look at it, massive train wreck, look at Daimler Chrysler and that one, and you can read about it in Harvard Business Review. And that's the summation of all their findings. Right. Cultural incompatibility between the Germans and the Detroiter guys, you know. So anyway, so you guys you know what, let's honor some of these really good questions before we segue into types of stock. So I'll just read this to everybody so you can see it. And then you guys can answer, you know, some of these questions, like none of us are qualified to answer. I'll just say that right now. But So this is what he says. I'm curious as to everyone's opinion on the red hot 4.9% GDP numbers and the off the charts blowout number regarding durable goods orders at 5.8%. That crushed the forecast of 0.1%. That's a massive miss. It's akin to the weatherman missing a Cat 5 hurricane. PCE rolled into town at 2.9%. Quarter over quarter. Real consumer spending, another huge whiff, 4% versus forecast of 0.7. Yeah, I mean, well, that is amazing. So number one, what's the impact plus or minus on interest rates moving forward? What do you guys think? So we're going to ask for your great Houdini crystal balls here. Has the Fed lost control? Here's my question: did they ever have control? The third question is impact of 8 trillion in debt being rolled over in 2024. What's that? 4, the Fed's $8.5 trillion balance sheet. 5, China being a net U.S. bonds seller. 6, what are your thoughts on the recession probability? 7, what should companies be doing to prepare for a recession that's durable? 8, how should companies be playing the higher interest rate game? Ooh, these are really good questions. And you know what, Derek Painter, I saw you coming on the wrong channel here, but so I think you're on. You might want to weigh in if you can on any of that in the chat. If you're not driving, do not do that while you're driving. So thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually would, tend to agree with your statement, Gary, that, has the Fed ever had control? Because it's very fascinating to see, like, we're pulling the levers, and I'm like, really? Like, it's like trying to move a freight train, so
Yeah.
the whole theory was I'm going to increase. So I would have maybe not said this was missing a Cat 5 hurricane. I would have said it's the opposite. It's more like I forecast a Cat 5 hurricane, and what I got was calm. Because this is actually, hey, we thought it was going to suck, and it didn't suck. that was surprising. So it's hard for me to really understand how much of that was just related to I bought stuff that was more expensive, but I bought the same volume of things, leading to the increase or not. But I think what we do know is that, look, real wages have gone up. So Gary's buying power has now gone a little bit in excess of inflation, meaning like Gary's raises have gone beyond just the catch up with inflation, so he's got some more money to spend. I think if they keep on pushing for a 2% inflation target and it stays at where it's been at, then yeah, you're going to have interest rate increases. Like, in other words, I don't see them having a different go-to move, because that's what they think their go-to move is keep on raising interest rates until we stop buying stuff. And you're starting to see that more in the housing market, a little bit in the car market, versus business borrowing. So from a business borrowing perspective, the way I always look at that is kind of the same way I look at tax rates. Gary, interest rates are going up, and I have this great opportunity to make $100. Geez, interest rates are going up, so I'm only going to make $98. Should I do it? You're still going to make $98. I know it's not 100, and that sucks, but you're still going to make $98. Yeah. So why would you not do that? So, and I think pretty much most of prognosticators are saying it's going to be, if there is a recession, it's going to be somewhat soft. I mean, I heard on the news this morning that they're saying, hey, is Germany actually in a recession now, primarily because of a reduction in auto demand? I don't know, but it seems like it's going to be soft, whatever it is, with the exception of, you know, the debt is pretty bad. That's going to require some draconian measures at some point, which are probably going to be tax rate increases, and kind of look for a flat line then. But they'll probably keep on pushing that out until 2026, 2027. That I haven't looked at an economist forecast to see what they're saying, but that's what my own feeling is.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, go ahead.
I know we need to move on to the next to the topic
Yeah.
at hand, and those are great questions. I would just say from a psychological aspect of things, if you look at the history of dealing with financial matters in this country, you look at deficit surplus, it is a kicking a can down the road, generationally. And you have those that are like, okay, well, Skynet is coming, so it doesn't really matter. $10 to whoever can quickly put the reference to that movie that I just said into the chat. Only 10 seconds. And then, so it's someone else's problem, and then it'll get addressed, and then the problem recurs. So you have this repeated history of dealing with this problem of pushing it down the road. I think that I agree that, okay, did the Fed ever have control? But it's just one of the levers that we have, a very, very potent lever that the government has in order to address fiscal financial policy. And so, all these things, recession probability depends on who you talk to. And I've said this before, turn on, CNN and then turn to Fox News or CNBC, and same story, but you wouldn't know it because of what is being said, who's being blamed for what. So, so Derek, happy to chat with you more on offline with this stuff and give you it's all Jack theory. It's, I am not an economist, nor do I play one on TV. I dress up like one occasionally, but none of that. So, but that's my 2 cents overall, 30,000 foot level on those questions.
You weren't wearing a bow tie yesterday at the CEO convergence, so you weren't really dressing up like an economist yesterday. I'm just saying. So let's tee it up about phantom stock, which is not scary. It's scary, I suppose, if it's the wrong tool. But can you guys go a little bit deeper into the water and talk about the most common questions you guys get on, hey, I want to reward my employees with some skin in the game. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so this is a question that we get asked all the time. And and it's like, it's like people invent all sorts of sexy words to come up with what basically, if like the punchline of phantom equity is the glorified bonus system, and all you're really doing is saying, do I want to have a bonus system? There's more to it than that, but do I want to have a bonus system or not, to reward some key people? And then, of that reward system, do I want it to only be tied to a sale of the company and a growth in value? Or alternatively, do I want them also to be able to share in profits of the company? So I think, from a legal perspective, this is more Jack's department, but the things that I would be the difference obviously between equity and phantom equity is exactly that. Phantom equity is not real equity. It's still a contract, but it behave like what I always think about in my little brain. And Jack, this is where I'd ask you to chime in and save me from practicing law, is that you draw up a plan. Like, in other words, if Gary's going to be on the phantom equity plan of BGW, I'm drawing up a plan so that we're both clear on how the plan operates. And it provides like more gravitas, to the plan, because like we both signed it, it's got some structure, some definitive, like, hey, if this happens, then you get paid this. If this happens, then you get paid this. And I would suspect, Jack, that if I didn't honor it, Gary would have a claim against me. Is that kind of, did I get that about, versus like if I said there was going to be a bonus program and I did not pay the bonus because I know I said that, but no, I suspect Gary would have a claim in the instance of phantom equity versus if it was just really just a bonus, there's no possibility for a claim.
And you know what my answer is going to be to that, right?
It depends.
Yes, it depends. So, and the reason why I say that is I mean, you said it, it's the documentation. So the way I look at it is that, okay, first of all, actual equity. Clients have to convince me that giving someone actual equity is the best course of action for them. And the way they have to convince me is, does cash, is cash not king for this person, so that you can give them cash? Do you really need to motivate them and have skin in the game for them? And this goes for, phantom equity or actual equity. But let me take that back, for actual equity. And so, convince me that they need to be an owner and have skin in the game and all those factors before I will agree to draft the documentation. For me, phantom equity is more of a calculation, and it is a formula that is used to say, okay, we're going to treat you as if you are an owner, and we are going to use the metrics that we use in ownership distributions in order to get you money. And it's meant to be the best of both worlds, which is it gets you money. It puts skin in the game because you only get that money performance wise. And it's linked to kind of on par with the owners, versus a bonus, which is usually discretionary. Many times it's tied to metrics, and so it's just the mere passage of time. Did you meet the formula or not meet the formula? But many times it's still discretionary. So is there enough cash in the owner's minds to be able to pay out this bonus to you? And even with the metrics, is it 30% of what the metric, the formula would produce in order to pay you? So but I tend to move more towards the bonus structure just as the default, because for many people it's, yeah, I'd rather have the cash. Now, not to get deep into your world, but when you pay someone a bonus, that's ordinary income, that's money that they're getting. And unless and until you set up a proper plan and it's treated as equity, then you don't get the capital gains treatment associated with that. And I think also what we should talk about, Adam, is, and feel free to take over in talking about ISOs and NSOs and how those are taxed. And then we can go into kind of what true phantom equity is, because I think that there is, at least from my perspective in my conversations, there's confusion as to qualified, non-qualified, what does that mean, what gets taxed, and all those things. So that's really more of a tax thing versus a psychological perspective. Why are you getting this, and what are the purposes of it? So I don't know if you want to touch on that or would like me to.
Yeah. So,
because I threw it out of left field to you. You weren't expecting that.
Yeah,
we didn't rehearse this. So I'm happy to do it because I did look at, I have a refresher from my my peeps. So I can go through that.
Yeah. So I mean, the basically, the difference between the two. I mean, there's a few differences, but the primary difference between the two is, and Jack, save me if I said something wrong here, is the difference in the term qualified, which basically comes down to how is the money actually earned? Meaning like, hey, do I just like get it? Or which would be non-qualified, or alternatively, is there some sort of performance obligation associated with it, which hits the qualified treatment?
Yeah, and conversely saying the same thing, but from a different perspective and subject to forfeiture, right? And so
Right.
you have those, and the way I look at it is also I believe that qualified, you get it, you exercise it, you own it, but you're not necessarily, and again, these are generalities, but you're not taxed on it until after you dispose of it. So you sell it, versus non-qualified, you get taxed upon the exercise of the option. And again, there's exceptions. And so we don't want to get big into tax regulatory issues. But so you have, yes, if you set up the rules and you put together a plan, and then you have the issuance document for those options, and you do things properly, then you are held, you're available to take advantage of certain provisions in the tax code that allow you advantages to offer to those recipients, which are also somewhat advantageous to the company. Now, many times the qualification gets blown, and so you're back into a non-qualified plan, and then you have to do certain things. But there's formality to it. You have typically a plan administrator, someone that's in charge, and it could be someone internal, it could be someone external. Again, there's rules around all of those things, but focusing on phantom equity again is a mechanism to give someone money or other perks based upon performance that is somewhat guaranteed, but not as guaranteed as a bonus. So then that's why people are like, well, wait a minute, I mean, phantom equity is just really a bonus plan. I'm like, at its fundamental level, essentially, yes, it is, but it's a sort of a different set of rules. So, at least that's from my perspective. And again, we could spend a lot of time talking about all of that, but really, it's just, we're here to kind of talk about the fundamentals and the options that you have in order to incentivize. The other thing too is that depending on the rules you set up for this bonus in the form of phantom equity, as far as when it is actually given, and when the income is recognized, when you can recognize it as an expense, also can be modified to the point where it's a true bonus is measured at a certain point in time, and it's paid out or not paid out. So I think it gives a little more flexibility depending on the terms and conditions that are put together. But understand that there is this kind of I don't want to say exalted, but on the qualified side, if you set it up that way, non-qualified, and then kind of, at least those are my three buckets, and then the kind of the phantom equity, and I guess the fourth bucket would be a true bonus structure.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
did I mess that up, or does that sound right to you?
No, you did pretty good.
Because I'm way out of my lane right now.
Yeah.
But
So people that these are the most common, why you could do them in C corporations. These are most common in S corporations and partnerships, where you've got, membership interest or flow. Excuse me.
bless you.
Flow through.
Bless you again.
Flow through income. And you're trying to keep the employee's life clean. Hey, you still get a W-2, but then you have this additional, rights to stuff, because I'm trying to reward you, and also kind of lock you in, like make this kind of, a big deal. So what I thought I'd share, since a lot of our clients have actually, toyed with the idea of, do I do something like this to lock in my key management team to incentivize them and want them to stay? I thought I'd just give you guys some parameters that our clients have used fairly successfully. But the first thing that I would say is, and I say this to all of our clients, is that, typically what happens is you think, okay, I want to implement a plan, and I'm going to design the best plan ever, that's totally going to incentivize Gary, to do the right thing. But I designed a plan that will incentivize me to do the right thing that may not be anything at all what would incentivize Gary. So my first statement is like, only get so far in designing your plan before you run it by the people that you're actually trying to get into the plan, especially if this is like a first iteration of it with like the first group, because what'll end up happening is you're going to design this great plan that you think is the most generous offering on the planet. And then you're going to present it to your team, and then the team's going to say, oh, or they're going to say, well, but what happens if I quit? You know, but what happens if, and you're going to be like, stop asking me freaking questions. I'm trying to be generous here and reward you. Can't you freaking see that? So just, kind of know that's going to happen, and it's better that this is like an iterative process to get kind of mutual alignment with the plan that's going to work. But once you kind of get there, the elements are generally going to be around like, okay, first off, is it going to be a plan that only rewards, Gary on the event of me selling the company? And if so, how much of the sale do I want to share with Gary? Like, do I want to carve some off the top for myself? Do I want to say, hey, we're going to share the whole thing if it sells? Like, so most plans that we've seen say, hey, thank you for the service. The company is worth $5 million. That's mine. We will share everything created going forward. That's pretty common. The second thing is very similarly on the profit side of the profit sharing side of the equation, assuming that you want to have some share of the rewards, you would typically say, again, thank you for everything that you've been doing. The company, while you're an employee, has been doing just fine, earning $1.5 million a year. That's the floor. Once we earn $1.5 million a year, we'll share in the proceeds. Those to me are the most two common kind of parameters that people lay out to make sure that they're not, the owner's not taking a pay cut to then reward the employee, that you're really doing what was intended, which is, hey, you're awesome, and I totally want to share any future growth that this place has going forward.
I want to throw out a corporate governance angle to that, which is when one of the benefits of phantom equity is you're not granting ownership rights, because again, from my perspective, it's more of a way of calculating a number to get money to the individuals who are the beneficiaries of the phantom equity. Conversely, what I see sometimes happen, unbeknownst to me, or they come to me after the fact, is, oh yeah, we gave this person, we gave this group of people actual ownership, and by doing, and it's really kind of an equity plan, but an unofficial equity plan that we just had an arrangement, or even maybe there's some documentation that isn't very clear, other than giving someone these rights to acquire the stock. They acquire the stock, and then that creates two issues. One is that if the shareholders have certain powers within the shareholders agreement. Okay, let me take a step back. And they come to me and say, okay, we have these minority shareholders, and everything was great because we already had a shareholders agreement in place. Everything just kind of fit into place. Well, what they hadn't considered is the shareholders agreement gives some pretty broad powers to the shareholders, which now this minority group is a part of. Sometimes giving them veto powers over some fundamental things, like making changes to the shareholders agreement, and some other big decisions, like potentially selling the company, unanimous consent of the shareholders. Well, when there's only three and they know each other and they've known each other since they were in preschool together, then that's one thing. But when you start bringing in strangers into the mix, that's another problem. And so that gets forgotten. The other issue is more economic. And I've said this before on this program, which is that I've had the conversations with individuals who gotten business together. They have a shareholders agreement. One person has gone kind of rogue on them after 20 years of being in business, has been paid really well, has been getting bonuses, has been going on boondoggle trips, and they want to buy this person out. And it has a provision in it regarding the buyout of that person, which is a problem in and of itself, because you forget about that and you don't update the shareholders agreement. But add in another variable of an ownership in minority owners who maybe were key employees, and you've given them actual shares, and now they are subject to this formula, which may be more robust than, and the outcome, the result, the product of the multiplication gives them a lot more than what you had intended by doing that. So the phantom equity route helps protect against a lot of those mishaps that were unintentional or hadn't been thought about by the issuer of the phantom equity or the real equity or their lawyers. And I'm not saying that, we spot every issue, but there should be enough minds in the room to say, okay, hey, do you realize by doing this that this is what you're doing, or guiding someone into phantom equity because of all the reasons of not bringing someone fully into the fold of being a full shareholder.
You brought up something that's really important for anybody listening, and that is, before you do that, have a really honest conversation with a qualified attorney, and ideally your tax professional too, that can help guide you before you even if it's not legally binding, but your word means something. Just hold it, get good advice. And I'll give you an example of bad advice where two founders went to a local attorney in Nebraska. These two young founders are in their 30s, happen to have a shoe company, and I happen to know one of them really well. And the attorney had them basically giving up founders' shares. They didn't do it, thank God. They wanted to do some good things for their employees, but I connected them to an attorney and to a private equity guy that has been by my side for a long time. And he really knows. And he's like, holy moly, they got some bad advice. And it was just some, local guy. Oh, are you an attorney? Yeah, I'm an attorney. Well, good. You can help us solve the problem. Not always. So just before you enter into any of that stuff, make sure you got somebody that knows what they're doing, that you trust, but that really knows what they're doing, because it has long-term ramifications, and trying to unwind that stuff once you've said amen and signed it, even worse, it can be a mess. It can't, so anyway.
And I'm going to go out of my lane again into yours and say, here's another bad scenario, which is you bring someone on board as a full equity owner, shareholder, or even in an LLC that's treated as an S corp, and then you go ahead, even though it's an S corp or an LLC with S corp tax treatment, you have disparate, not pro rata, not along ownership lines distributions. You've just blown your S corp election pretty much. And so, there's that. And so again, another benefit of phantom equity, because it's more of a calculation and you're not treating someone. So, the phantom equity distribution, again, stop me if I'm wrong, that is, above in the scheme of things, as far as distributions go. It's not a distribution, it's a payment of income. And so therefore you're not at the ownership level, you're still at the operational level on your as far as expenses go. And so again, another benefit. But I've had others who have come into a business and have been offered phantom equity, and they say, well, no, because I know it's going to be valuable someday, more valuable than it is now, partially because of my efforts, which is why that exists in the first place. But I don't want phantom equity. I want full equity so that I enjoy the benefits of ownership, including capital gains treatment on the gain of those ownership interests of those shares otherwise. And so, and I have fought for that for employees coming into ownership and saying, okay, what is your end goal here? Well, to make a ton of money, obviously, is the first answer. Okay. Do you understand that if you go down this route, this is how, and I always say, subject to your CPA saying differently, this is the outcome, in general terms, as far as it's ordinary income, whatever your tax rate is, go ahead and apply that, versus it being, okay, what is your tax basis in the ownership when you acquired it? And then, what is the gain? And then, treat it a little differently. And so sometimes that's really important. for people as far as their estate planning goes and things like that. And so they want to have skin in the game because they believe the upswing is significantly beneficial, not just the actual dollars, but the tax treatment of those dollars that they receive down the road.
I saw that also backfire for a well-intentioned CEO who was worth a lot of money, wanted to reward their kind of chief of staff who did not have much money at all, but was very loyal, faithful, very good, key employee with stock. The problem was it created tax challenges for that employee. And then they ran into some cash flow challenges with the company that they couldn't pay the tax burden that was now upon the employee who is an equity owner. So it's just like, you say it a lot, Jack, it depends. And I understand why, because there are nuances on all of this thing, all of this stuff. So you just have to start with the end in mind and have somebody beside you guide you, so you don't inadvertently create an issue on one side or the other, like, and slow the train down just a little bit to do it right.
And I'm going to make a statement that is, I think everyone on would agree to the statement as being common sense, but may not understand why they are agreeing that it's common sense. So, which is, you can't get something for nothing, meaning that, okay, you're about to be given ownership interest in a company that is successful and has value, and you're about to be given ownership interest in it. The government does not like to miss out on taxes when there is actually a transfer of value on the ownership interest of a company. So you have to deal with it one way or another. And whether it is actually, because you mentioned it, okay, sometimes the recipient isn't able to accept the ownership interest because of just financial burdens. And so imagine the scenario where, okay, there is a tax consequence, which is you're about to get this. So someone has to pay taxes on something, and either you do or the person giving it to you, there's a gift involved. Maybe they, they use part of their annual exemption or their lifetime exemption to make that happen. Maybe there's a promissory note that the installment payment gets forgiven over the course. So there is a bit of complexity in making something, a gift essentially, where you say, well, okay, there's no cash being transferred, so surely there's no tax. That's not the case. And so we could spend another hour talking about all of that as well.
Very true. Have we seen that much, Adam, where somebody inadvertently creates a tax consequence that they didn't intend?
A couple times. A couple times. The other thing too that I hit on this too is that, you get a lot of times, it'll come up in due diligence, hey, are there any plans, that exist that we should know about? When you're trying to sell your company, it's like, you had this good idea at the time, but then circumstances changed. And you never went back and like eliminated the plan, or converted the plan. So next thing you know, you've got, a legally binding obligation, for people, that you got to deal with. So if you're going to do this, I think my own feeling about it is that it's a great option if you're not, if just going the full, hey, Jack, you're getting some equity route is not the route you want to go. It's a really good option. A lot of people will say out of the gate, you don't want to do anything with equity. You don't want to part, blah, blah, blah. It's like that's, can be true, but it can also be solved with governance. It's just more like, if who I'm doing something with, like if my route isn't like an internal succession plan, and it is an external exit, and I really am trying to reward a loyal employee management team, this really is one of the best options, that's out there. but that being said, just because it's not real equity, you really need to treat it like it is, in some respects, in terms of like the formality with which you follow the protocols associated with it. In other words, like I would treat them like they're owners, even if they are not, and follow corporate formalities, and that means like, hey, if I'm doing, if part of Jack's plan is he gets to participate in profits of the company, I'm going to be pissed if that, even though I may not have a legal right to it, I may be pissed if that's like, post tax planning shenanigans, because that artificially drove down the income, so it's like stuff like that, that I think you just got to be more, be more cognizant of, because those questions come up. It's like, well, it's a really great plan. I'm super excited about it. I mean, but what about the vacation that you always blow through the company? Do I gotta pay for that? Before I get the bonus, like they're legit questions,
Yeah.
Your kids are on the payroll. And I'm not getting a bonus for that. All good tax planning moves, but they're legit questions.
Yeah. Hey, I know that we're coming up to the top of the hour, but is there any way that you could talk about the difference between profits interest? Because it was mentioned earlier briefly. And I've been in companies that had that, but then actually didn't. So I got more that actually didn't work. But anything that you could talk about profits interest?
There's presentation on the tax return, but I think it really gets more into it. To me, that's more of a legal distinction that I'd really have Jack opine on.
Yeah, I mean, a profit interest to me also is synonymous with economic interest. So basically, what you're doing is you're extracting the management functions. Well, I guess depending on your perspective, if you are the issuer of those interests, you're extracting the management and voting powers away out of that full ownership interest and leaving the economic interest. Conversely, you as a recipient, you're getting the benefits of ownership as an economic interest and everything related to that, but you're not participating in management. It is the LLC's way of kind of creating non-voting shares in the context of corporations, which you're permitted to do both in a C corporation and an S corporation, so long as you do it correctly in S corporation and don't mess with the economics of the, meaning non-voting, I'm talking about now. That you can have non-voting shareholders in an S corporation. Again, there's rules around that because they can't impact their economic rights on a distribution being pro rata according to their ownership interest or their shares. But it's a fancy way of saying, and again, we can talk about tax treatment and everything else about that, but it is basically separating out those two aspects of ownership.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in this case, the CEO proved to be a fraud and didn't want anybody to have any voting shares. But he pitched it like, oh, hey, like, oh, man, I got some stories. So anyway, and everybody has some stories. So we're at the top of the hour, guys and gals. Thank you for paying attention and for joining us. Thank you, Randall, for sending us some questions. Next time, feel free to hit us with some questions ahead of time or during the broadcast. And if you didn't see it, I posted in the chat because Derek pulled off and took time to answer some of those questions in the chat. So I made that available to everyone. So Derek, thanks so much for doing it. And by the way, Jack, he nailed it. Terminator.
So you're saying I owe him a coffee card? Okay.
Yeah, I kind of think you do.
Okay. I can do that.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Next week 182.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys. See y'all. Bye-bye.